You can't swing a dead displacer beast in D&D communities without hitting one extremely common piece of advice for dungeon masters. Don't overprepare. This advice is everywhere. It's the most common advice beginner DMs get when they ask for tips, and people often tell me this even when I'm not asking for advice. I hope y'all have hellish resistance because this take is gonna be hot. That's bad advice. Ah! My flesh. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. Dan Dillon, a game designer for D&D, had a whole Twitter thread about this a few years ago, and I actually had a great conversation on this subject with Mark Humes, the DM of High Rollers, just the other week, and we were kind of on the same page. Not only do I think don't over-prepare is unhelpful advice, I think it can even be potentially harmful to new DMs. But I'm not here to drop a spicy take as engagement bait and then disappear. This isn't Twitter. I'm here to explain myself and then provide a solution, like a goddamn contributing member of the community. So let's get started. There are a few reasons I think don't overprepare is bad advice. The first of which is it's oversimplified. Shocking on the internet, I know. There are so many things that go into session prep. Everything from map making to world building to encounter balancing to creating NPCs and mapping out quests to picking loot. It could refer to narrative descriptions, reviewing notes from previous sessions, creating rolling tables. The list goes on and on. So what prep is this advice even referring to? Is it saying prepare all those things but only a little? Is it saying prepare some of those things but not others? Everyone probably has a different definition of what overpreparing looks like in their own head when they say this, but what's in their head doesn't necessarily translate to the people hearing this advice. The wrench in the gears here is the word over. Who's to say how much preparation constitutes over-preparing? That implies that there is an appropriate amount of prep, but doesn't actually explain what that amount is. Without that distinction, this advice is functionally meaningless. It's like giving someone directions and all you tell them is go north, but not too far north. Good luck, hope you find it. Every DM has a different style and different needs, so even if this advice came with a description of how much prep is too much prep, it still wouldn't apply universally. Some DMs are capable of coming to the table with zero preparation and delivering a great game, and others are decidedly not. Most DMs fall somewhere in the middle, where they benefit from certain kinds of prep and not from others. Even if that's true, saying this advice is harmful seems like a stretch. Honestly, I don't think it is. I mean, for one thing, I think there's a very real risk that DMs who prep too little might end up with a game that feels superficial and boring. Improvisation is all well and good, but there's also a place for thoughtful, intentional choices, and it can be very difficult to make those off the cuff. Sure, you can improvise a dungeon crawl, or a random town, or a short quest, but if you want politics, or mysteries, or secrets, or history, that's gonna require at least a little preparation outside of the game to execute. I'm sure there are some DMs who can wing an entire compelling campaign arc, but not many. I also think it can be harmful to new DMs to imply that investing time and thought into their prep will make their games worse. D&D is a pretty complicated game. I mean, it requires textbooks to play, and some of the key parts of gameplay, like combat encounters, are complex enough that you need a lot of experience to be able to execute them well with no preparation. Before you've built up experience and learned what does and doesn't work for you as a dungeon master, prep can be pretty crucial. I received this don't over-prepare message early on as a dungeon master, and I really did try to take it to heart. So instead, I under-prepared, which left me stressed and scrambling during sessions. And once I realized that this advice didn't work for me, every time I heard it, it just made me feel like I was a bad DM. After all, if this was the advice that everybody but me found useful, I must be the one doing something wrong. So I kept ignoring my gut and forcing myself into situations where I had to improvise things that I knew I wasn't good at improvising. And my game suffered for it. It was only once I accepted that I thrive as a DM when I feel thoroughly prepared that I finally started doing game prep that actually worked for me. I think you're misreading what don't overprepare means. You're taking it too literally. You're absolutely right. I know that what I just described is not what people mean when they say this, but it's what I heard, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. If your advice requires some hidden context in order to be useful, context that you don't provide, then the advice is worthless. So let's talk about what people do mean when they say don't overprepare, and how we can shape that into advice that's actually useful.
Source enough parchment for our needs? That's your problem. Our contract locked in pricing.
Whoa, Francis? You look different.
Oh, it's you. Yeah, my map-making business, Summer Pike Quill and Compass, is booming. And it's gonna really blow up when Dungeon Fog introduces their new community hub in May.
Oh, that's right, Dungeon Fog, the map-making tool that makes it easy to create and customize beautiful maps for your games.
Yeah, but not everyone wants to make their own maps. The community hub makes it easy to find the maps you need from other artists, like me. You can browse by category or theme, plus it shows you recommendations, new artists, popular maps, and even lets you follow your favorite map makers or check out their whole map library on their profile.
Well, it looks like it's really working for you.
It is. As a map maker, I even get insights on who's using and modifying my maps. I'm building a real community here, and the new preview pages make it easier than ever to share maps on social media.
I'm really proud of you, Francis. I know we didn't get off on the best foot, but...
Francis? What? I thought I made it clear that ink shipments were to be weekly. If you can't keep up with Summer Pike's demands, there are other suppliers out there who can. Oh, you're still here?
I mean, it's my office.
Right. Well, you can check out Dungeon Fog to get notified when the hub goes live. You can even sign up for a free account to find maps for your games or start making your own. Good luck with everything, Jenny.
It's Ginny.
I expect that ink to be at my shop by sunset.
Huh. Anyway, now that I have more experience as a DM and I've spent years in D&D communities, I understand how this advice is intended. When people say don't overprepare, they're really saying something else. Two things, actually. They're saying don't railroad, and they're saying don't waste prep. Let's look at these one at a time. First up, don't railroad. What does that mean? Urban Dictionary says it's about an unjust conviction, or a guy it with a... Okay, that's enough. If this is your first time hearing the term in this context, to railroad means to force your players down a certain path, like how a train has to follow railroad tracks. Instead of a train, you want your players to feel like they're in an ATV. They can go anywhere they want, even if that's off the road and into the wilderness. To me, saying don't overprepare when you mean don't railroad is a case of mistranslation. It's not the act of preparation that causes DMs to railroad their players. Some DMs prep very little and still force their players to follow a certain path, and many extremely prepared DMs make the choice to follow their player's lead. That's because it's not really about how much you prep, it's about how you respond to your player's actions at the table. Which brings us to part 2, don't waste prep. To be more specific, don't waste time preparing things that you may not end up using. This is inherently tied to the railroading thing, because if you spend a lot of time preparing something that your players will only encounter if they make certain specific choices, you might feel compelled to force your players into making those choices, so that you don't have to toss all of your hard work into the garbage. But just like the don't railroad translation, this one breaks down because of an assumption. That assumption being, the more you prepare, the more you're attempting to predict players' choices. And this is absolutely false. It is entirely possible to prepare thoroughly while still allowing your players freedom during the actual session. Okay, but how? If the answer isn't preparing less, then what is the answer? A fantastic question. I would like to propose a revision of this advice into 2 parts that I think are more helpful to beginners than don't overprepare. First, prepare flexibly. Some preparation is valuable no matter what your players choose to do. Dan Dillon put it well in that Twitter thread that I mentioned before. Preparation is not about a script. It's about having a solid understanding of what's going on in the world around the PCs. For example, in one of my home games, a cult has been spreading a drug that siphons magical energy. The DM, Jesse, undoubtedly knows where the drug is coming from, what it does to users, and what the cult is getting out of it. All of that is prep. But he has no idea what we're gonna do to try and stop it, or if we're going to try and stop it at all. We could decide to capture and question one of the cultists, or to examine and treat one of the users, or to investigate the drug itself, or even to take the drug and see what happens. We could ignore the drug completely and pursue other threads. No matter what we do, Jesse's prep allows him to figure out what's next. None of it is wasted. Of course, sometimes you really do need to plan past player decisions. When Mark Humes and I talked about this, he suggested a simple way of looking at it. What's important, and how can your players reach it? Sometimes you need players to reach a certain point or learn certain information. Instead of defining the path that your players have to take to get there, center your prep on that certain point or certain information, and let your players reach it using whatever path feels natural during the session. Maybe they learn about the royal conspiracy by eavesdropping on a noble, or by bribing or threatening an informant, or by accepting a quest to dismantle it, or by being invited to participate in it. As long as you have a thorough understanding of the conspiracy itself, you can give players the freedom to approach it in whatever way they like. That all sounds very nice, but some prep just doesn't work that way. Like, what about combat encounters? You're right, encounter prep can take a lot of time, and players might completely avoid it. But remember, combat can be reskinned or relocated. If your players don't end up going into the forest where you had prepared a fight with some wolves, then maybe it becomes a fight with some feral dogs in the city, or some escaped giant squirrels or something at the circus. The players talked their way out of that fight with the guards that you spent an hour preparing, that's fine. Those guards are bandits now, and the party can encounter them in a few sessions when they leave the city. Or you can sit on that encounter for the next time that your players inevitably find themselves on the wrong side of some guards. I think one of the best ways to do this is to focus your encounter prep on the mechanics of the fight rather than the flavor. Flavor can be improvised, but balance takes more work. The more you can develop this flexible mindset, the less pressure you'll feel to make sure that players do the right things, and the more you can adapt to the way that they want to interact with your world. Okay, sure, but one time my players said they were gonna board a ship, so I spent the whole week coming up with a crew and researching seafaring combat, and then they changed their mind and teleported to the other side of the continent. Ouch. Listen, sometimes D&D is just like that. The freedom to do literally anything is part of what makes this game so exciting. Even flexible planning can still break when it's bent too far. It's an inevitable part of DMing that you will occasionally prep things that you don't end up using. But the more you can allow for player agency in your game prep, the less often this will happen, and the easier it'll be to laugh it off and let it go when it does happen. Which brings me to the second part of my advice. Prepare to your comfort level. Personally, as a DM, I thrive on feeling prepared. If I don't feel like I'm ready for the session, I feel anxious, and that comes out in my DMing. I am the most fun and the most engaged as a dungeon master when I feel confident, and preparation gives me confidence. I'm a person who loves lists and spreadsheets and notes. It's just who I am, even outside of a tabletop gaming context. I would much rather have prepared something that I don't end up using than need something that I didn't prepare. I am not by any means saying that it is not possible to over-prepare. It totally is. All I'm saying is that that's a line you're gonna have to locate for yourself. There are plenty of DMs who would look at my game prep and say that I over-prepared. But if I've prepared to my comfort level, then I know I've done the right amount of prep. Once you've established that you're not gonna railroad your players, what's the worst case scenario of over-preparing? If it's just that you prepare something that you don't use, you get to decide whether or not that's a problem. I recently created a small town where I knew players were gonna spend at least a few days. Could I have come up with all of my NPCs off the cuff? Probably. But having a list of NPC names, descriptions, and brief personality notes made me feel totally ready for the game and gave me a lot of confidence during roleplay. The players didn't meet every NPC, but who cares? For me, it was worth it. Likewise, you can decide how much you're comfortable improvising and let that inform your decisions. One key part of all of this, and a big part of my beef with this advice, is that beginner DMs often don't know their own comfort levels yet. You can read and research and ask for advice, and it can be helpful, but ultimately, nothing is going to teach you what works for you except for actually doing it. It wasn't other DMs telling me don't over-prepare that taught me how I like to plan for sessions. It was sitting down in front of a blank document and preparing for sessions, and then running sessions, and then reevaluating whether or not I prepared the right things. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's what I would like to see us teaching beginner DMs. Learn, explore, practice, and figure out what kind of DM you are. That's why in these videos, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm trying to make you think, bring up new ideas, and challenge your assumptions. For more advice that I think beginner DMs need to hear, make sure to check out this video about 5 DM lessons that I wish I'd learned earlier.
You okay down here?
Yeah, I'm filming a part where I fall off of a chair because there's fire, and then I say, ah, my flesh.
Okay.
Bye.